Well, first, let's talk about what's actually happening today. This is not a vote on the voting rights bill. This is a vote on bringing the voting rights bill to the floor so that we can debate it. It looks like my Republican colleagues are going to filibuster just discussing the bill. Even though they've been offered opportunities for amendments and free debate and open debate. So what's happening today is worse than just filibustering a bill. It's filibustering saying we don't even want to bring this bill to the floor to debate it, to discuss it, and to allow the American people to hear that debate. So that's what's happening today. It looks like we're not going to get the votes. Now, there are two paths from here. One is the Republicans can come forward and say, okay, here's some things we can accept, here are things we can't accept, and let's try to negotiate an agreement on a bill that we can move forward to protect voting rights in this country. The bill that you describe has been around now for 6 or 8 weeks. I haven't heard any of those discussions or any of those proposals, but that's a possibility. The other, as you suggest, is to deal with the filibuster issue in some way that basically restores the Senate to where it's used to be historically. The filibuster has been used dramatically more in recent years than ever before in American history. And by the way, it's not in the Constitution. The framers actually debated whether there should be a supermajority requirement for the passage of legislation. They decided not to do it. They knew fractions. They said it takes 2/3 to approve a treaty, but they didn't say anything about a supermajority for the passage of legislation. But that's become the routine. We have to go through cloture votes on a deputy secretary of defense. And it's really ridiculous the way it's been used. So the second path, Andrea, is some modification of the rule, whether it's a carve-out, whether it's a requirement that those who are opposed have to actually come to the floor and hold the floor. But those are the two options. One is, okay, filibuster is supposed to encourage bipartisanship. Let's come to the table and talk about it. Or we're going to have to look at some changes in the rule. I'm one of those who's been very reluctant about that. But to me, if it's democracy versus a Senate rule, the Senate rule has to give way.
And you've already accomplished a big hurdle, crossed a hurdle by getting Joe Manchin to agree with you on the form of the bill. You've already changed the bill to bring him on board. So there is the prospect, I guess, of negotiations. But so far, Mitch McConnell has just been dead set against this. So you are now ready to do some sort of carve-out or a talking filibuster or some sort of restoration of the old form of filibuster if no negotiations are permitted by the Republicans?
The answer is yes, but the question is why. And because I've always been very reluctant about it, I've been opposed to changing it because it's a double-edged sword. Once it goes away, it's not there to protect you at some later date when the shoe is on the other foot. But this is democracy itself. We're talking about laws being passed across the country that are designed to keep people from voting, to limit the outcome of elections, to create congressional districts that are grossly gerrymandered to really deny equal representation to people in this country. And I think the country's in danger. I made a speech on the floor last night and made the point that America, the idea of a democratic republic with representative government, is an anomaly in world history. It isn't the norm. The norm are pharaohs, kings, czars, and now we call them presidents for life. That's what's normal. And democracies can slide into that kind of situation. Hungary, Venezuela, and Turkey have done that just in our lifetime. So I think this is a hinge moment, a real pivotal moment for this country as to whether or not the idea of the people being in charge is going to survive.
Do you think something can be done, before the end of the year?
Yes, I do. And it's going to hinge on a few members, as you know, and Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, and others. But as I say, I've been one of those who's been very reluctant to arrive at this position. Joe Manchin believes in the right to vote. He helped negotiate this bill. He was a former Secretary of State in West Virginia, so he understands these issues and what's going on. And but he's also very committed to the idea of the filibuster. But the concept that he's committed to is the idea that you're forced to get bipartisan support. That theory doesn't work if the other side just says no. If the other side said, okay, we're going to withhold the votes, then we're going to have a negotiation, come to some kind of settlement, some kind of agreement, that's one thing. But in this case, if it's just, we're just going to say no, no way, no discussion, we're going to let the states strip voting rights from people across the country and change the law so that a partisan legislature can override the votes of the citizens of their state and send their own electors to Congress for a presidential election. That's the kind of thing that's going on now. I don't want to get into reading my colleagues' minds, but I think there's a growing consensus that we've got to do something about this. And it may not be abolish the filibuster, but it may be modify it in such a way that it becomes harder to block things just for the sake of obstruction.
Senator Angus King.